And I want to welcome you to this session called Making Content Comprehensible. I am Cammie Goucher, the English Language Development Director for DESE's Office of College and Career Readiness. And objective for today, we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to make our content comprehensible for English language learners. We're going to look at anchor supports, what they are, why we should use them, and who benefits from the use of them, and how they can be used. And our language objective is going to be speaking about our existing and new knowledge about making content comprehensible. And then the link for the note taker is there again, and that'll be on the slide if you want to refer back to it later. So here's how we're going to start. I'm going to tell you right off that I dislike ESL. I also dislike ELLs, and I really don't love ELs. That might make you go, huh? Since I'm the director of ELD. But I'll tell you right now, what I do love are ABS, which stands for Amazing Bilingual Students. And if you can speak more than one language, that's wonderful. People who are bilingual have, through research, they've proven that they have more connections in their brains. So let me explain a little bit. ESL means English as a second language. And the reason I dislike that is because for some of our English language learners, this is their third or fourth language, not their first language or their second language. And ELLs or ELs is English language learner or English learners. And we're all English learners all of our lives. We're continually learning how to use English better. So both of those are kind of inaccurate labels. We give these students these labels when they started with a different language in their home. Either they came from a household that spoke a different language, or they came from a different country where they were learning a different language. And the thing about our English learners in America, most of them lose their home language or their dominant language by the age of 6 or 8 or 10 if they come as children. And really what we're talking about when we speak about English language learners is that they're weak in at least one domain of learning academic English. And that's what we're looking at. To be classified as an English learner, they have to be weak in listening, speaking, reading, or writing English, and have another language in their home that has an influence on that language. So our job is to strengthen our wonderful language learners, and they require a slightly different approach with maybe a little bit more intensity. They have to work sometimes on specific areas, and you have to be extremely careful in your approach, because if you overdo it, you can actually damage what the students are learning and burn them out, stress them out where they don't want to try as hard and learn the language. So you have to be careful in your approach as well. When we're working with our ABS, it's important that we understand that becoming proficient in a second language takes time. It's not something that happens automatically. It's not something that's the same for every student. It's not linear. And it has its ups and downs as we progress through it. It's a gradual process, and it's never the same for any two students. So it's important that we get to know our students as well as we can when we get started. We have to find out, where they came from, what their interests are, what languages they speak, how well they speak their home language, what ties to their culture they have, and as much background as we can get on them to prepare us for what instruction we need to provide for them. My computer's being crazy. Okay, So the next thing we need to look at are what we call the BICS and the CALP. I don't know if you've heard of that before. BICS are the basic interpersonal communication skills that the student has or develops. And they usually form in the by the first 3 years. And that's where you hear them speaking to their friends or talking on the phone or communicating with you. And they may sound like they have control of the English language, but they're just getting those basic interpersonal communication skills. They don't have the academic language yet. And that's what the CALP is. CALP is the Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. And it usually takes 5 to 7, sometimes 10 years for that to develop, where they have the vocabulary that they need for a business or formal communication in a classroom or other settings. And there are a couple of misconceptions that I wanted to bring out. Our English learners don't have a language deficit, they just don't understand English. And BICS doesn't have to be developed before CALP, they sometimes develop at the same time, or they often are developing at the same time. Okay. When we're working with our apps, it's important to know that making the learning meaningful and purposeful is very important. We have to make connections to real life for them. And the more we connect and give purpose to what they're learning, the more quickly they learn. It's also important that we teach them about the culture of the United States so that they understand some of the things that are going on around them, because they don't have that background knowledge. Excuse me. So we're trying really hard to do this comprehensible input. And this is an idea brought about by Stephen Krashen many, many years ago. And comprehensible input says that people acquire language when they receive oral and written messages they understand. And he takes that a little bit further with this I+1, input +1, which kind of is telling us that we give them things that are a little bit difficult for them to understand, but through all the supports that we put around it, they're willing and they're able to internalize what we're teaching them and go forward. So that's what this +1 means. We've taken them to their limit, but we're pushing them a little bit more by adding in some of these supports. And the supports that we give them are these visuals in realia, interactive communication, hands-on, low affective filter, and meaningful and challenging activities. So those are all what bring about what we call comprehensible input. One of the things we can do for our students is assign them a buddy to work with. But we want to make sure that our buddy's a good role model, that we have the proper expectations for both members, and that the buddy you assign has the strength to do the job. Because if they don't, it could be damaging for both of them. So, good things to keep in mind with a buddy. We also want to put them in group work as much as possible. Small groups are the best and most effective way of working with them, but you want it to be flexible so that they're not working with the same person all the time, and working with varied levels. So you can put them with students who are at the same level if you're working on a skill at that level. If you want to challenge them and provide a role model, put them with someone that is a little bit higher level, but make those groups flexible depending on the need of the assignment. Also, we need to continue to have high expectation for our students. We don't water down the content when we're presenting it. We present it at the level that we want them to be learning at, but we put in all of those scaffolds and accommodations to make it accessible for them, that comprehensible input. We have to think of different ways of letting them show what they know, because they often don't have the language to tell us, but they are understanding. So it has to match their proficiency level so they can show us what they understand. And we can't expect everyone to work the same, everything to work the same for everyone. They all have unique characteristics, and as this picture shows, it looks like they're all doing the same thing, but if you look really close, you'll see that not all of them bring both feet up at the same time, and not all of them have their knees straight. So there are some different unique characteristics that each one brings and things they need to work on, and the same is true with our English learners. It's also important that we have a variety of different instructional strategies at hand. And sometimes we bring those up just on the fly. So we need to have that built-in understanding of what our students might need so that we have it available should that arise. One thing is not going to fit all for all students. And it just, like I said before, it takes learning who your students are and what their needs are and what their levels are to have an idea of what might be needed when they need those assistance. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes. Another thing when we're working with our students is assessment that we need to keep in mind. We need to know what our students can do. So we can give ongoing informal assessments that tell us how much they're working towards achieving a goal, and then those summative assessments to see if they've reached their goal or if we need to go back and reteach and rework on some of the skills. All right, and I told you we were going to talk about some anchors. So we need to provide some anchors of support for our students. And what those anchors are to build the background. As I said earlier, they don't all come with an understanding of American culture, or depending on how much schooling they had before they came to America, they may not understand some of the things that are presented in our textbooks. So we have to build that background for them. We also have to make the content accessible, and we can do that through video or photos or hands-on things that we bring in just to cement the understanding of what we're talking about. We also make language accessible for them by pointing out cognates or words that are the same in our language or similar in our language and their language, or providing some assistance in their first language, some translations. Again, we want to structure so that we're providing the same rigor in our instruction for them as we do all other students. We don't want to lose that in the process. We also want to lower the affective filter and make them comfortable to take chances in our classroom when we're working with them. So those are 5 things we want to keep in mind as we go forward. And what are the anchors of support? Well, those are the posters and graphics and other organizational representations that teachers use to anchor the ideas for the students that help them get an understanding of what we're doing. And we need them because along with modifications and accommodations, they allow the students to understand the content. And just for clarification, a modification changes what we teach, and accommodation is changing how we teach it, or the method that we use. So why do we need these anchors? It helps us to recognize the goals, review concepts, set expectations, involve the students, and allows them to be comfortable. So a lot of my students would keep these in their folders or in their notebooks. We would keep them on the wall as a poster that they could refer to often. And it just cements it into their minds so that they have a better understanding of what we're learning. A lot of times, even if I've taken the posters off the wall, I'll see the students looking to that spot on the wall where it was and remembering what was there, and just knowing that it was there at one time helps them to put that picture back in their minds and make that association. So we're going to look at a few anchor posters, which would be a chart that we put on the wall like I was just discussing. A lot of times I would take these and let the students copy them into a notebook. If we're doing it digitally, I'll give them a digital copy just like I have here on your screen. But these are just some different examples of what those would look like. So a lot of these have to do with science and math. And some of them are teacher made and some of them are student made. So I allow them to make the posters and help me out as well. And they go over like acronyms. If we made an acronym, it spells them out to help them remember. Sometimes with pictures, just to help them get a visual of what we're talking about. And this one, the teacher did some things to help the students better understand. She's taken and highlighted the B with yellow, which is the area of the base. And then you can see all through the picture, the base is labeled and is yellow to give the students that visual picture of what she's talking about when she's referring to the base. And then also on this, talking about circles, she made the C go around the circumference of the circle. And the R for radius just comes up to the middle, and the diameter of the D goes all the way across the center to give them that association with the word and the picture. Very helpful. And then this is just a word wall for math, where we have pictures and symbols for the different things they need to know, and they're added as they go along through the lesson to give the students a reference to look at. This is something that would probably go in their notebook, the fraction, percent, and decimal chart, and we kept those in a notebook. And then again, some things the students created, and more posters. We can also do it for language arts. So this one gives you an idea of theme versus main idea, and what theme and main idea are. And then we made one for the North and the South of the Civil War, so that they could see who was the president, the general, the strengths and the weaknesses, and just had that charted for something to refer back to. And we've got non-fiction textbook, text features, and another math chart showing compare and contrast. So again, these are things I would keep up on the wall or make copies for them to keep in their notebooks. All right, and then 4 ways that we can make learning comprehensible for our students. We can adjust the content to make it easier for them to understand and learn. We can adjust the process of how the students make sense of what we're doing. We can adjust the product of how they demonstrate what they are learning, and we can adjust to make it more comfortable, that affective filter for the classroom. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of those. So for the content, one of the biggest things and most important things we can do is set our essential question for the student. That's the first step in determining what is going to be most important about what we're teaching. And like it says here, when you're in doubt, go small, choose less, focus in on a specific skill that you need them to get. Maybe it's the big idea, and then you can add the smaller details in as you go. And then also determine what the student's responsibility is going to be. What learning responsibilities are they going to need to undertake for their learning? And make sure that it's realistic and attainable for the student. When we're determining our essential questions, we need to, what it is a question that frames a unit of study, what we're going to solve, how we're going to get there. And it should connect the students' life experiences and their interests to problems in the world, what we're trying to learn about. So again, it goes back to that, making a connection for your students, because they really do learn better when it means something to them, rather than just random things here and there. So if they can put it to work, then it has a lot more meaning and they learn much more quickly. And this is according to McTeague and Wiggins. They say that essential questions have these 7 characteristics. They're open-ended, thought-provoking, require higher order thinking, and point toward big transferable ideas, raise additional questions, requires some justification, and will recur over time. So it's not just one and done. It's something you're going to use throughout your lifetime or throughout your school career. And there's a lot of information plus a video, but it's not something I could copy. So I put a link here that you can look at that later and watch their videos. It gives you a lot more in-depth information about essential questions. All right, so when you're writing, or when I would always write my lessons for each week, I would start out with my content objective and then add in my language objective, and then also include what my essential question for the students would be, as well as the vocabulary that I've selected from the lesson. So the essential question gives us a focus of what we're going to be learning specifically, what big idea we're trying to solve, or what big question we're going to try to answer when we have finished the unit. And here's some examples of some essential questions, like this first one: how can shapes be sorted? So an essential question like that is going to be more than just one day. It's probably going to be a whole unit of study, at least for a week. And what we could do would be to say, first, how can we describe a square? And then maybe, how do we describe a parallelogram? And then maybe look at triangles. And then after we've looked at each shape, then we can say, how can these shapes be sorted? So you take it in progression over time. And then going on with the comprehension process, how are you going to present the information? How are you going to scaffold or build upon what background the students have? What supports are you going to provide? And then how will you assess, either formatively or summatively? And then when we're looking at scaffolds, what a scaffold is an intentional support that the teacher gives them to help them understand what they're presenting. And when you look at this picture, the scaffold is on the outside. So it's those external things that you're giving the students to help them build their understanding. And the hope is that they take those external helps and internalize them. And when they've started to internalize them, then you can take away those external scaffolds, those supports, and they should be able to do it on their own. So we give them the scaffolds until they've internalized it and can do it on their own, and then we take them away so that they can show that they can do it independently. And this is a wonderful website that provides different scaffolds for the students, and it's from ELL's 2.0. And I put the link. If you just click on the picture, it will take you right to it. But they give you some hacks that you can use for YouTube. You can adjust the speed to where it speaks slower, and sometimes that helps the students. There are also, you can do closed captioning so that it's in the student's language with any video on YouTube that has closed captioning. Then there are different tools that you can use for recording, for finding visuals. There is a note where you can give verbal notes in the text for the students. So if they submit something with Google, you can send it back to them with a verbal text message right within the document. Then there are some translation tools that they give you, a tool called Mercury Reader, and then Flipgrid, which I really love, as well as Immersive Reader. So they give explanations on how to use each of those tools. It's really in depth, and they do a wonderful job. Then they talk about, with speaking and writing, you can use the text, or voice to text, or speech to text, Google Docs, which translates. Again, storyboards, there's a link to a storyboard tool, and again, Flipgrid that can be used as a whiteboard. So it gives you explanation on how to do and use these scaffolds with the English language learners, and they're all very well done and could be a whole lesson within themselves. So it's kind of a self-paced learning that you can go through with that site as well. And then before you teach, the comprehensible process is I always started with vocabulary, and I limited the vocabulary to 5 to 8 words at a time, just because I wanted them to truly understand the most important things from the story. So I'd select a text and then identify the key words that the students might not understand that are really important to understanding what's going on in the story. And then select the tools for teaching the words, whether they be flashcards or some sort of game, or writing open-ended sentences and filling in the blanks, using picture cards, whatever fit the needs of the students and their proficiency level. And then created a mini lesson to teach that vocabulary to them, and use more than one time, several times, practicing the words as we go along. This front loading of the information helps them when we actually get to the story to understand better what's going on. Because this is what a paragraph looks to students at different proficiency levels. So if you have a beginning ESL student, they're not going to know some of these bigger words. And so when they see, they're going to pick out just those basic letters or words that they know, like the and in and at and maybe states if they've heard of them. So at a beginning level, that's all they're going to get out of this big paragraph. At the intermediate level, they've gained a few more words. So they're going to pick out things like morning and person and sounds and cry. So they'll add a few more to it, but they don't get the gist of the whole paragraph unless we front load some of this other vocabulary that our advanced students are going to get. So that kind of gives you a visual image of what the progression of reading a paragraph would look like for our students if we don't put in those supports and provide that information ahead of time. So pre-teaching the learning strategies, we need to teach our ESL students how to organize information, how to take notes, because a lot of them have never taken notes in a classroom before, how to identify the main ideas, supporting details, how to sequence, summarize, how to do that question and argue and response, and the close reading, and these will take you to a link on some of those if you aren't familiar with those. And one of the things that we used from the very beginning in my classroom were timelines, because I never thought of it before I started using it, but timelines can be used in lots of different areas. They show a linear progression, so you can use them for just getting them used to the arrow that points the other direction means there's more information to come. We can talk about the sequence of time from yesterday to today or tomorrow. We could also take a word like happy and add the next word, which might be joyful, and another word that could be glorious, to show that progression over time. So we can use timelines just to show that progression from the small to the large, or time as it goes forward. So we use timelines a lot, with just showing that arrow, showing the progress. Another thing is printing out your notes or your outline for the lesson and providing that to the student in advance. So if you have 1 or 2 English learners in your class with other students, just giving them the notes ahead of time and highlighting the important facts or important words so that they can translate if they need to before the lesson starts is helpful. Also, if necessary, they might have some graphics put in on their copy so that they have a better idea of what you're talking about when it comes to it. And planning for cooperative groups during the lesson, where students again can work with each other, sometimes with a native speaker that speaks the same language for clarification, or sometimes with someone who's close to their level so that they can work easily together. And then these are some resources that I used within the classroom for leveled textbooks or leveled lessons. These are all kind of current event topics Newsella or Newsela gives you several different proficiency levels of reading. So you can pick the same, it's the same text and the same information, but it's easier to read at different levels for the student. Teen Tribune kind of does the same thing. And they provide you questions also that are leveled to the student's reading ability. And the breaking news for in English, and they have breaking news in Spanish and several other languages as well that do kind of the same thing. And then graphic organizers are also very helpful to our English learners. And you can give them to them partially completed if they're low proficiency, where they just have to find specific words, maybe those vocabulary words that you've been working on, and finding how they are related to the text. And I also would locate videos or podcasts or realia images, all those things before the lesson, before I start teaching, so that I have those for the students when we start the lesson in case they're needed. And then this link down here takes you to some different graphic organizers for different languages. And here are some examples of some of the graphic organizers that we used in our classroom. We use circle maps a lot that help you define content. So we put whatever we're talking about in the middle, and then just started brainstorming all the things that went with it. Sometimes we did this together, and sometimes I would do it one-on-one with students if they needed it. And we put this in their notebooks as well. Our tree maps are very helpful. And a lot of times we left these up and added to them as the year went on, and just kept adding more and more as we went deeper into a subject. Or with colors, that one stayed up there all year long, and we just added to it all year as we found things that were different colors. Bubble maps, they really are all about adjectives that describe the topic we're talking about. And we used those a lot when we were writing, when we started our writing lessons. And so we'd have a topic and then all these adjectives that we could think of, and then we used them and put them into our writing. And then for comparing and contrasting, we'd make double bubble maps, where like this one is the large intestine and the small intestine. So we'd find things that were shared and then things that were unique to their characteristics. I think this one's brass and woodwinds. That one was for music. And then here's that flow chart again that kind of goes with sequencing. So how to make a snowman. We'd start with something very simple like this, and get that cemented in their understanding of how that linear progression went. And then later on, we could use the same thing when we were talking about something like the civil rights events, and we start with what's happened first and add to it going in a linear progression. So that flow map was good. And then there's a multiple flow map where we start with one, and then we talked about what happened and then the outcome from what happened. So this one I like: garlic, morning breath, onions, not brushing your teeth, no scope, leads to bad breath, which leads to a loss of your friends, no one talks to you, loneliness, visits to the dentist, and I don't remember what that, flowers will wilt. One of my students put that together. I thought it was so funny, had to save. And then we have brace maps for part to whole. So like your body systems, when we started talking about the different systems of the body, we divided it into the four main. And this just gave the students a visual that they could go back to if they needed some help remembering what went with what, and helping them to study. And then bridge maps, like Tony is the son of his dad, the nephew of his uncle, and the grandson of his grandma. So they give you that comparison. Something else while you're teaching for the comprehensible process is to simplify your language. And when you're simplifying your language, you're going to simplify it to the need of the students. So some students need yes or no questions. Some could do either or, and some you can ask how and why questions. But when you're giving conversation, and I still tend to do this because I taught English as a second language for over 20 years. My husband will say, talk to me like someone who understands, sometimes because I tend to simplify my sentences and things all the time. So you try to eliminate the excess words and be very precise and explicit in what you're telling them. So you're going to use the subject verb object structure to your sentences, and you avoid passive voice like this says. Instead of saying the balloon was popped by the boy, you say the boy popped the balloon. Also slang and idioms, they are not cross-cultural. So some countries don't use slang and they don't use idioms. And some of the things we say really take them aback because they don't understand what we're talking about, and they take things literally when we're using slang or idioms. Also, we need to make sure we speak clearly and slow down. Don't speak really quickly, and don't ramble off on a subject. Try to stick to the topic. It helps with their understanding. And something interesting that many people don't realize, we are one of the very few countries that use cursive writing. So when you're writing on the board or on a white on the marker on the computer, don't use cursive because a lot of them can't read it. They read print. I thought that was very interesting when I learned that, because I never thought of that before. And when giving directions while you're teaching, make sure they're simple and explicit. And a lot of times I will give the student an actual copy of the directions so that they have them, or put them on the board so that they're there. For some of my lower proficiency students, we even color coded our step-by-step process. For first would be one color, next would be the next color, and how you end it, what you do with it when you're finished, it would be another color, so the students knew exactly where they were in the process. And sometimes they even wrote their part of that activity in the different colors so that they know they were completing them correctly. And then sentence stems are very important to students, or response cards. So I give my students a card that had the sentence stem of how they should respond, for like if we were having a conversation, or even if they're writing, to give them some help in supporting how they're going to write or speak. And then here's an example from the classroom. We had the students every quarter in sixth grade do a world culture or geography assignment using Newsela. And the seventh graders did the same thing with science. And they would write about the same article, but from the different proficiency levels. And I scaffold the content before they read by picking the proficiency level that they needed as far as reading level. And then I found for them those videos or podcasts or something, pictures, whatever would support the reading to give them better understanding, so that they had all those things ahead of time. And then they would get with a partner, and together they would generate the sentence stems for their writing. And then they would on their own write whatever response to the article that they needed to do. But we provided them with all the scaffolding ahead of time to make that end process much more simple for them. So for the students, we would give one of these charts that asked who, what, when, where, why, and how. And for the lower proficiency, like it says here, the beginners might be a little bit different, because we would give them who, and I'd give them the beginning sentence. The main character in this story was, and then they just had to fill out that part. So we gave them a little bit more, but for most of them, they would start with this general, or they'd work towards this by the end of the year. These are some tools, again, that I really think are wonderful for our ESL students. I love Wakelet and Immersive Reader. If you haven't used either one of those, Immersive Reader is built into Wakelet, and I've provided, these are linked so that you can go and check them out further. But Immersive Reader, what it does, anything you type in, immersive reader will read it back to the students, and it can be translated to, I don't remember how many languages they have now. It's like 30, somewhere in that area. But you just teach the students how to pick the language they need, and it reads it word by word. You can even have it color code the nouns, verbs, and adjectives, different parts of speech. You can, I believe it will also create a word list for you. I know Read and Write for Google is another tool I used all the time with my classroom, just because we were a Google school. And it does basically the same thing. It'll read word by word, and it will color code the words for you by parts of speech. And you can also click a button and it will create a word list for you with a picture dictionary. It does all of that for you. And Read and Write for Google is free for teachers, and it will do all of that. So you could use it in creating your lessons. You can create those word lists with picture dictionaries already built into it, and it prints it out into this really nice handout for your students. Or your students can use a free version as well that just reads it to them, and it has a built-in picture dictionary and a built-in dictionary and a built-in translator. So that's a really wonderful tool for anyone to use. There is a paid version, but like I said, the teachers get that version free and students can use the basic version for free. Another tool that I really like is Edpuzzle. And what it is you can take a video, usually YouTube videos that I would find for students, and you upload them into their platform, and you can take it and make pauses wherever you want and add information in. So you can, like, if you come to a point that you want to explain further or you want to provide more information to the students, you put a pause in and it lets you type in information, or you can type in questions that the student would answer. And any input the student gives is gathered for you, and you can use that as an assessment, or you can use it as a check-in for the students to make sure that they're understanding what they're reading as they go along. But it's a wonderful tool as well, and all of these are free. And the thing about these is we should extend and allow them to independent practice and assessment. So after they've used them with you, they can go and use them on their own to create their own activities and lessons, response to lessons. So we want to also remember all of the different learning styles and the modalities when we're teaching. Reading, writing, listening, and speaking should be part of every lesson. But if you're focusing on a lesson, you should only pick one to focus in on at a time. So if you want to say, today we're going to work on our reading skills, or today I want you to really practice your listening skills. You're going to listen for this. So pick one that you're going to focus on for a lesson, rather than making the students try to do all four at the same time. And that helps them to hone in on a skill and really practice that skill, even though you're doing all of them at the same time, and they probably don't realize they're doing them all. But if you're looking to assess or to really look at one skill, do one at a time. These are some other supports for language. TT Español is reading and activities that are in Spanish. You can get Khan Academy also in Spanish. Brain Pop is also in Spanish, and I think they've added a few more languages lately. And then these are just Spanish graphic organizers that I found to share with you. After you teach, you want to look and see that the students are using their content glossaries, that they're using the tools that they have. You want to speak with them individually, ask specific questions, and avoid saying things like, do you understand, or do you need help? Because they'll just say yes or no, but be more specific. It's like, I noticed that you did this in your lesson. Can you tell me why you included these words, or what you meant when you said this? So get specific with your questioning so that they have to speak back and really elicit their input. And then planning for further instruction should be part of the after teaching looking at what they've done, what needs to be retaught, how can I take it deeper for the ones who did understand, and what things did I do that were effective or ineffective that I want to use again or worked for that student so that we can use them again. And when possible, give the students choices when you're giving an after teaching assignment. So how would you like to show me what you understand? What can you do? Do you want to draw a picture? Do you want to write something? And then when you assess, make sure that your assessment matches the way it was taught. So if the student used pictures to show you that they understood, your assessment should use pictures so that can show what they did. And your rubric should match your goal. So however you taught it, that should be the same way you assess it with your language learners. Some of the ways we've done this is allowing them to use notes or note cards when they take the test, giving them those sentence stems or clues to prompt their thinking, extra time, reading the test to them. And these two tools, Speak It and Immersive Reader, could be used for that, so that you give the assessment online, like a lot of the assessments they're taking now do. And they can listen to it and then answer the questions. You could also use Flipgrid to give assessments where it asks a question and the students could give a verbal response. Other ways you can assess are to give, like if you're giving a multiple choice with 4 questions, just give 2 choices, a right and a wrong for the early proficiency levels. And simplify the questions, the language of the questions, so that it's very clear. You might provide a word bank if it's a fill in the blank, so that they don't have to try to come up with those words on their own, because after reading the sentence, it's hard for sometimes to think of all those extra words. And having them right there is not cheating, it's just giving them some assistance. Sometimes using matching is very helpful. And using charts instead of a written response, where they have the words or the answers on one side and they pick which answer goes in along with it. And again, those sentence stems instead of fill in the blanks. And then the difference between a sentence stem and a sentence frame. A sentence stem has the blank at the end, and a sentence frame has blanks throughout the sentence, so it can be anywhere. That's just a clarification there. Sentence frames are used to structure the student's output, and they can use sentence frames for both speaking and writing. So a lot of times we'd give them the frame that they could refer to when they're going to give a speech or something, so they have that support to help them in their speaking or their writing. And the thing with using the sentence frames and stems is it helps them to internalize, where they get more comfortable with it. And then it becomes automatic and they don't need them anymore. We can take them away. But even some of my more advanced students would ask for sentence frames or stems to get them started. So it's a good help for them. And it also will increase the rigor, because you're giving them more formal speech and a more formal way of putting the words together. And they like it because it makes them sound smarter. And that improves their affective filter as well, because it makes them feel good about what they're doing and that they can do what the other students are doing. Sentence frames work really well with word banks and with these graphic organizers. So as you can see here, we're comparing and contrasting, and I've given the sentence frame. All they have to do is fill in the frame, the graphic organizer with what fits in the frames. And that's very helpful for them. And then this is a sentence stem. And this was, I think, a 6th grade boy who was learning math. So we gave him the sentence stems: I know, I showed, I learned. And this is what he says. I know plus and times are like the same. They go bigger, they get bigger. I showed 12 plus 12 is the same or equals 12 times 2, which is 24. So half of 24 is 12. And I learned that half plus half is the same like doubles. So he put all of that together, even though he was a very low proficiency level student, he was able to come up with those sentences because we gave him the stims to get him started. And he was able to show what he understood about that math concept. Flipgrid, again, I can't say enough, it's a great tool to use. It helps and builds the students' confidence with speaking. They get to practice many, many times over and over before they actually have to submit the recording. It allows for wait time and repetition. It can help them get ready for a test, or even you can give the test through it by what they submit. Again, it practices speaking and listening skills. You can actually get your family involved in it. So you can share it with families and they can respond to them, or they can just look at what the students have been doing to give them an idea of the students' progress. I kept a file of my students' flipgrids over time so we could see how they progressed at the end of the year. And then there's also something called Grid Pals, where they can connect with people all over the world and have kind of pen pals if you were interested in kind of that, taking it a step further. We actually had a class pen pal, and we would talk to students in other places and have conversations as a class. So that was kind of fun. And this is another example of how the students can show a product. This teacher made a memoir unit, and this specific lesson was talking about how a song can be part of your history and have meaning for you. And it takes you step by step on how the teacher created it and how they did the vocabulary and step by step to the end product. So I wanted to give you that as an example that you could refer back to. And then helping your students with that effective filter. We want them to feel equal and valued in the class. So some of the things you can do is make sure you say their name correctly. A project that I did with all of my classes from kindergarten to high school was called My Name, My Identity. And you can actually look that up on the internet. It's a worldwide.
We're having a hard time understanding you.
Oh, sorry, I think my internet blurped there for a minute. This tool is called My Name, My Identity, and it's something used internationally.
We were frozen for a while. We missed a whole bunch.
Oh,
Yeah, we missed, you started at was effective.
okay, I'll start there again. So
Your sound is breaking up.
still yet? You hear me now?
Yes.
Internet. There she is. Oh, now you're muted.
Sorry about that.
That's
Let
okay.
me share my screen again.
It's the fun of these days.
This is true. We'll start with that screen again.
You came back quickly though.
Hopefully it stays. My internet wasn't working at all this morning. They're working on a tower by me, so hopefully we can keep going. Hopefully. Yeah, see if I'm still recording. Nope, I'm still recording. We're good. Monique got booted too, it looks like. All right, we'll start again with the effective filter. Again, this helps your students to feel equal and valued. And I was telling you that it's really important that we say their names correctly. And one thing I did every year with my students from kindergarten all the way to high school was something called My Name, My Identity. And it's kind of an international thing that you can go online and become part of their group. But what it does is it encourages you to have the students tell their name on video. And we even drew a little picture about our names. And then they tell you kind of the background of their name, if they're named after someone, or if their name has special meaning, so that we value their names. And then I always shared that with their classroom teachers so that their teachers would be sure to say their names correctly, because that's an important thing. And as far as being valued, we don't want to Americanize their names. We want their names to be their names. And they would always ask me, well, how do you say your name in Spanish? I said, well, my name is the same as English as it is in Spanish. That's my name. and getting that idea across is kind of unique to some of them. You can also research their culture. We did culturegrams of their different countries so that we knew a little bit more about kind of the customs and the mores and what you don't do and what you do from their countries. As far as we had some countries where girls weren't allowed to speak unless they were asked to speak. And so they never would speak up in class until we knew that that was part of their culture and gave them permission. You know, anytime you have something to say, you can say it here. So just identifying that was very helpful. And being warm and encouraging and treat them like you would your own children. So making sure that they know that they belong here is important. And this is a hard one too, because a lot of times we get frustrated because we don't know what to do to help them, and they pick up on our frustration and they think we're upset with them when we're really not. We're upset with ourselves. So you have to be careful of not letting them see that you're frustrated or explaining to them, I'm not upset with you. I'm upset that I am not able to help you the way I want to. And so that because they do perceive that. And then just some general accommodations. And overall, we start with the prior knowledge that they have and build to new knowledge. We start from the concrete, the things they can touch and feel and see before we move to the abstract. We develop oral language because they all come with a rich oral language. And usually that's the first to develop before they move to text. So slowly interweave those. When you start getting some oral language and understanding, we can start interweaving the text into that. And so within a lesson, so we would say the words first before we see the words. So you don't have to do all oral before, but you say them first and then look at them and then connect the two. And move from the more content support to less, take away those scaffolds. And use lots of hand motions and visuals and all of that to help with understanding. And then this is just a big list of things that are helpful for comprehension. And the things at the top of the list are research proven to be most effective with English learners. This one is to increase interaction. And I've provided this link to the go-to strategies. If you haven't heard of them, they tell what each one of these are and which proficiency levels they're best for and how to do them. They give a little information on each one, what the teacher does, what the student does, and how that helps the student at different proficiency levels. So each of these are specific to interaction, but they're all within this tool, the go-to strategies. And then these are all for thinking skills. And again, they're found in these go-to strategies. Then they'll tell you exactly what proficiency level and how to do each one. A great tool. And then if you haven't ever researched this classroom instruction that works, it's from Marzano. It's a really good tool for English language learners. It tells us 9 strategies for modification of text and how to use those in instructional planning. So I shared lots of stuff with you. So can you think of one of the resources that you could use as an anchor support? And I've given you a sentence stem. I would use this as an anchor support in my classroom by. So can you think of one thing that I shared with you that you might be able to use?
I wrote down all of the graphic organizers.
Yes.
You talked about the circle maps, the tree maps, bubble maps, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually a regular AEL instructor, and I substitute in our ESL classes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I signed up for this. But you gave me so much information that I can use with my students, especially my students who are lower learning.
Yes, that's the great thing about our resources for English language learners. What they say is what works for English language learners works for everyone, but works for everyone doesn't always work for English language learners. So that's
I kind of felt like sometimes I'm probably speaking a foreign language to some of the students who don't understand. So
Right.
really it is a good comparison.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share?
Work with adults. And I'm not a teacher and I'm not trained. So the more of these I watch, the more clues I get as how to teach.
Great. I hope you found it helpful. And you can, I'm going to share the link back with you to this presentation, and in the note taker, I provided lots of links and also other places you can go for more information. At the end, there are a lot of links that tell you how to do some of the things. So you can go back and self-paste however long you want to, or whatever things you're most interested in, what you want to look at. And if you ever want more information on anything, you're free to email me and ask, and I'm happy to explain or to talk further about whatever, if you had trouble with something.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Since we don't have walls anymore.
Yeah.
I've been in the classroom since August.
Oh, really?
Oh,
And I
wow.
will not be in the classroom again next year. So,
Wow.
Do you use Google?
always.
Okay,
And
yeah, so you can make virtual word walls with Google that, and I've used, excuse me, I've worked with a few students virtually who needed some extra help, and I created some virtual word walls for them that they can keep in their little file and go back to, which has been very helpful. And the neat thing is you can animate them.
No, yeah. I put together a slide set for every class.
There you go.
And some of it I used to present, but some of it I hope they go back and look at, but I'm not allowed to give due dates or request homework. So I have no idea what they're really doing. Or if I'm just wasting my time.
Did you get the link to the last thing I did with your group? Because I showed how to make like the groups within a classroom, and you can see what everyone's doing. So you create a different slide and you can see what everybody's doing while you're working together, which is very helpful.
Small number of students.
Ah, okay.
So I haven't tried any breakout rooms yet.
Well, you don't actually have to be together on the screen at the same time. You assign it to them, and then you can go and watch while they work.
Right.
So you can see what they're doing on the screen. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is neat.
I used to teach technology too, so I'm kind of nerdy like that.
Well, that must have been helpful during all of this past year.
It was, yes.
Can't believe how much of that I learned over the past year.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I missed my little whiteboard so I could do spelling and short answer.
Yes.
Because then no one could see each other's answer. So I've created my own with spreadsheets.
Do you use Zoom with them?
No, we have to use Google Meet.
Google Meet. Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I think they have an annotation tool as well, where you can write on the screen together.
I use Web Paint on top of everything.
Yes, yes.
And I keep a black full screen presentation up all the time with 2 lines at the bottom showing so they can hear and see every single word I say.
Wonderful.
So
that's great.
Because there's closed captions in a few things, but when you're switching between a whole lot of things, that's constant. It stays all the time.
Yeah. Well, sounds like you've got some good things going on that you've been trying. That's wonderful.
I found that online. I didn't invent it.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you've used your resources.
Yeah.
Any other ideas?
Is Catherine real?
Catherine real? I don't know. Well, that's, oh, she's having issues. Okay.
Dad, can hear.
Is that what I sounded like a while ago?
Can you guys hear me?
No.
Oh.
Well, I hope she heard it because it was a good talk.
I hope so too. All right. Well, that's the end of what I have to share. If you have any questions or want to offer any other input, I'm happy to keep this going. Otherwise, I'm finished.
you, Cammie.
Yes. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. You were very organized. That was a very, very refreshing.
Okay, well, I will send you out, everyone that signed up, I'll send you out the link to the recording, and you have the slides in the note taker. And if you have any questions, you can put them on the note taker. I'll check back and look at it again to see if you've written.
Yeah, it was a really good presentation. Flowed well.
Thank you, Catherine.
With the note taker, is that something we have? I'm new to that. I'm sorry. Is that something I can have access to later, or do I
Yes,
just?
that link that I gave you, if you opened it up,
Yeah.
you can get to it anytime and you can type on it. I gave you editing rights, so
Okay.
you can put notes on there, or whatever. You can make a copy of it too and save it for
Okay.
yourself.
I understand now. Okay. Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And when I get the recording, I'll put the link to the recording in the note taker, since you already have it, and it'll all be there for you.
Any chance I can get PD for the recordings I watch? When I
You know,
respond in the note taker?
yeah, I actually print those in. So if you watch it later and you make comments and put that you watched it, I submitted those to,
Oh, good.
is it Miss Wilson? Is that her
I
name?
don't know.
I can't remember her name right off the top. She usually asks me for
Okay.
them, but I think her name was Wilson.
Yeah.
My
But-
director has us take notes and turn in 10 important things that you
There
learned.
you go. So if you watch the recording, I don't see why
Watch
that wouldn't
recording.
work.
I have watched recordings before to get them, to get my PD points.
There you go.
It's so hard
Um,
this year.
And there's my email if you want to contact me, if you need more information, or if you'd like to ask a question, I'm always available.
All right,
Just-
thank you.
Just send me an email, or you can even give me a call.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for attending. I appreciate you being here.
Yes,
Guys,
thank
I'll
you.
have a great evening.
You too.
And hopefully I'll
Class
see you
starts in
again.
15 minutes.
And there you go.
All right.
You all
Bye,
take care.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Uh-huh.